why this village hasn't celebrated New Year in 100 years. A long time ago, in a quiet village called Adanu, life was filled with joy and celebration. The villagers had a tradition that brought everyone together, a grand New Year's Eve festival. Children laughed, drums echoed, and the air smelled of roasted yams and spicy pepper soup. But one night, everything changed. The elder leaned closer to the fire, his voice heavy with warning. "Listen carefully," he said, his eyes scanning the children gathered around him. "Adanu has not seen a new year in 100 years because of a mistake, a grave mistake." That night, during the festival, a mysterious masquerade appeared. It was unlike any the villagers had ever seen. Its glowing mask floated above the ground, and its hollow eyes seemed to pierce the soul. The masquerade had come uninvited, and in their fear, the villagers broke a sacred rule. They mocked it, touching its mask, a mask that no mortal was ever meant to touch. The elder paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And so the masquerade cursed us. From that day, we have been trapped in an endless December 31st. We cannot move forward. We cannot see the sunrise of a new year." The children gasped. One whispered, "But Baba, can't we break the curse?" The elder's face darkened. "Breaking the curse comes at a price too great for most. But perhaps, one day, someone brave enough will rise." Afe stood at the edge of the village, staring out into the dense forest beyond. The elder's story echoed in her mind, the weight of his words pressing heavily on her chest. The curse had stolen everything from Adanu: time, joy, and hope. She clenched her fists, her jaw tightening with resolve. Someone had to do something, and if no one else would, she would. The village around her was lifeless. The streets were quiet, the once bright lanterns now dim. Children no longer played, and the drums that used to thunder through the night had long fallen silent. Adanu had grown weary of its endless December, but Efe wasn't ready to give up. She had heard whispers of a scroll, a forbidden relic said to hold the key to breaking the curse. The elders spoke of it in hushed tones, warning of the dangers it carried. But Efe wasn't afraid. If there was a way to free her people, she would find it. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Efe overheard the elders speaking outside the hall. "It's there," one of them murmured, his voice trembling. "The scroll lies deep in the forest of echoes, but no one has ever returned from that place alive." Efe's heart raced. The Forest of Echoes was a place of legend, a dark and twisted maze where spirits of the lost were said to wander. But if the scroll was there, she had to try. As night fell, Efe packed a small bag. A lantern for light, a pouch of water, and the courage in her heart were all she had. Without telling anyone, she slipped away from the village and into the shadows of the forest. The Forest of Echoes was alive with whispers. The trees seemed to sway with a rhythm only they understood, their gnarled branches twisting like hands reaching for her. The air was cold, heavy, and damp, and every step Efe took seemed to echo louder than the last. A voice whispered. She froze, her lantern trembling in her grip. The voice called again, this time closer. Turn back, but uncertain. "Who's there?" Efe called, her voice steady despite the fear that crept into her chest. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a cloaked being with a presence that seemed to pull the air from her lungs. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his voice was calm, almost soothing. "I am Obi," the figure said, "a guide for those who dare enter this forest. You seek the scroll, don't you?" Efe nodded, clutching her lantern tightly. "Yes, I need it to break the curse on my village." Obi tilted his head, studying her. "Many have sought the scroll, and all have failed. The forest tests the heart and mind. Do you believe you have what it takes?" Efe swallowed hard but stood her ground. "I do." Obi's voice softened. "Then follow me, and prepare to face the trials that lie ahead." Efe followed Obi deeper into the forest, the light from her lantern barely piercing the thick darkness around them. The trees grew taller and closer together, their branches twisting like tangled arms. The air was colder here, heavier, and every step felt like it carried the weight of something unseen. Obi moved silently, his dark cloak blending into the shadows. Efe stayed close behind him, her grip on the lantern tight. She wasn't sure what trials he meant, but she knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. She had made up her mind, and no fear would stop her now. They walked for what felt like hours until they reached a clearing. In the center stood a massive tree with roots as thick as the village huts. Its bark was covered in strange carvings that glowed faintly in the dark. Obi stopped and turned to her. "This is your first test," he said, his voice steady. "The tree holds the memories of the past. To move forward, you must confront what it shows you. Place your hand on the bark and face the truth." Efe hesitated, staring at the tree. She could feel its power, an ancient energy that seemed to hum in the air around her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and placed her palm against the rough surface. The moment she touched the tree, the world around her dissolved. The clearing, the forest, Obi, all of it faded into a swirling mist. When the mist cleared, she was standing in the middle of Adanu, but it wasn't the Adanu she knew. The village was bright and alive, filled with laughter and music. Children ran through the streets, women stirred steaming pots, and men drummed in rhythm with the dancing feet of the villagers. It was the Adanu of her childhood, before the curse. Efe's heart ached at the sight, the memory so vivid it almost brought tears to her eyes. But then the laughter began to fade. The music slowed and the villagers into confusion, then fear. A figure appeared at the edge of the village. Tall, draped in dark robes, with a glowing mask that floated just above the ground. It was the masquerade. The villagers froze as it glided toward them, silent and imposing. Efe couldn't move. She watched as the masquerade raised its hand, and a cold wind swept through the village. The lights from the lanterns flickered and died, and the drumming stopped. The elder's voice echoed in her mind. They touched the mask. They broke the sacred rule. The vision shifted, and Efe saw the moment. A young man, bold and unthinking, reached out and pulled the mask. The masquerade recoiled, its hollow eyes burning with fury. It spoke no words, but its actions were clear. The village froze, trapped in time, and the endless December began. The vision ended abruptly, and Efe was back in the clearing, her hand still on the tree. She stumbled back, her chest heaving as she tried to steady herself. "You've seen the truth," Obi said. "Now you understand what you face." Efe nodded, her resolve hardening. She didn't need any more reminders of the curse's origin. She had come here to break it, and she wouldn't stop now. Obi gestured for her to follow, and they continued deeper into the forest. They passed through narrow paths and overgrown roots until they reached an ancient stone shrine. The air here was colder, and the shadows seemed darker. "The scroll lies within," Obi said, pointing to the shrine's entrance. "But be warned, the scroll reveals itself only to those it deems worthy. If you are not, it will consume you." Efe stepped forward without hesitation, her lantern casting flickering light on the carvings etched into the stone walls. Inside the shrine, the air was thick with energy, and at the center of the chamber was a pedestal. On it lay the scroll, glowing faintly. She approached slowly, her steps echoing in the silence. The scroll seemed alive, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. Reaching out, she placed her hand on it. The glow intensified, and the shrine shook slightly. The words on the scroll appeared in her mind, clear and vivid. Instructions for the ritual to break the curse. But with them came a warning. To lift the curse, a sacrifice must be made. A price paid in blood. Efe's heart sank. She had suspected there would be a cost, but seeing it confirmed sent a chill through her. She turned to Obi, who was standing at the entrance. "You knew this," she said. He nodded. "The price must always be paid. The question is whether you are willing." Efe looked back at the scroll. The faces of her people filled her mind, the elders, the children, her family. She thought of the life they could have, the joy that could return to Adanu if the curse was broken. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. "Whatever it takes, I'll pay the price." Obi nodded again, his expression unreadable. "Then prepare yourself. The ritual begins now." Efe stood before the shrine, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a heavy stone. The scroll's glow pulsed in her hands, almost as if it was alive, waiting for her to act. She glanced at Obi, who stood motionless at the entrance, his shadow blending with the dim light of the forest beyond. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady but low. Obi stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. "You must gather the sacred leaves, ignite the bowl of fire, and finally, offer your blood. Each step brings you closer to the masquerade's realm, where the curse can be lifted. But you must be ready. Each step will test your resolve." Efe nodded, gripping the scroll tightly. "I've come this far. I won't stop now." Obi studied her for a moment, his hooded figure unreadable. Then, he gestured toward a cluster of silver-green plants growing at the edge of the clearing. "The sacred leaves grow only here, under the light of the full moon," he said. "Pluck them carefully, for their power is fragile. Without them, the ritual cannot begin." Efe walked over to the leaves, kneeling to gather them. Her hands moved carefully, but the air around her felt thick, as though the forest itself was watching her every move. Each leaf she plucked seemed to hum faintly, a soft vibration against her fingers. She placed them gently into a small pouch, her movements deliberate and respectful. When she had finished, Obi handed her a small, ancient bowl. It was smooth and black, carved from stone, with intricate patterns etched along its edges. "This is the bowl of fire," Obi explained. "It is both a vessel and a beacon. You must light it using the sacred leaves. Its flames will call the masquerade to this place." Effe's heart skipped a beat. The idea of summoning the masquerade, the being responsible for the curse, filled her with unease. But she forced herself to focus. She had made a choice, and she would see it through. She placed the leaves into the bowl, her fingers trembling slightly. Then, following the scroll's instructions, she whispered the incantation. The words felt strange on her tongue, ancient and powerful, as if they carried the weight of countless lifetimes. The moment she finished, a spark ignited within the bowl. It was small at first, a flicker of light, but it quickly grew into a steady flame. The fire burned without heat, its colors shifting between blue, green, and gold. It cast eerie shadows across the clearing, illuminating the carvings on the shrine and the dark outline of Obi. "The flame will guide the masquerade here," Obi said, his voice calm but firm. "You must be ready for what comes next. The final step requires your blood. It is the key to unlocking the masquerade's realm." Effie stared at the flame, its flickering light reflecting in her eyes. She reached for the small blade Obi handed her, a simple, sharp dagger with a handle wrapped in dark leather. Her hand trembled as she took it, the reality of her sacrifice sinking in. "This is the price," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "For my village, for my people." Obi stepped back, his presence a silent witness to her resolve. Afe pressed the blade to the palm of her hand, hesitating for only a moment before drawing it across her skin. As her blood dripped into the bowl of fire, the flames roared to life, growing taller and brighter. The air around her shifted, the temperature dropping sharply. The wind picked up, swirling through the clearing with a force that made the trees creak and groan. And then the ground began to tremble. Afe stepped back, clutching her hand as the bowl of fire glowed with an intensity that forced her to shield her eyes. The shaking grew stronger, and a low, resonant hum filled the air, a sound that seemed to come from the very earth itself. A voice, deep and echoing, filled the clearing. "You have called me," it said. "You dare summon the one who cursed your people?" Effie turned toward the sound, her heart pounding. From the shadows, the masquerade appeared, its glowing mask illuminating the darkness. It floated above the ground, its robes billowing as if caught in an invisible wind. The hollow eyes of its mask seemed to pierce through her, filling her with a cold, sinking dread. "You think you can undo what has been done?" The masquerade continued, its voice both mocking and commanding. "Do you understand the cost of your actions?" Effie forced herself to stand tall, meeting the gaze of the glowing mask. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "And I'm willing to pay it." The masquerade tilted its head slightly, as though studying her. "Many have made that claim," it said. "None have succeeded. What makes you think you are different?" Effie took a step forward, her fists clenched. "Because I have seen what this curse has done to my people. I have lived it, and I refuse to let it continue. If my sacrifice is what it takes, then so be it." The masquerade was silent for a moment, its mask flickering faintly. Then it spoke, its voice softer but no less commanding. "Very well, the ritual is complete, but the choice is now yours. Will you give your life to free your people? Will you forfeit your freedom for theirs?" Effie didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. With the masquerade, its glowing mask hovering just above her, its hollow eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. The cold air around her seemed to tighten, pressing against her chest, but she held her ground. The masquerade's voice was deep, resonant, and commanding. "You speak of sacrifice so easily, but do you truly understand what it means? This is no mere act of bravery, child. To forfeit your life is to forfeit your very essence. You will not pass into peace or rest. You will remain bound to me, to this curse, to the void between time. Do you still dare?" Effie's fingers tightened into fists, her body trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of her decision. Her mind raced, replaying everything she had seen. The faces of her people, their quiet suffering, the years stolen by the curse. She thought of the children who had never known a world beyond December 31st, the elders who had grown weary of an endless twilight. Her voice, though soft, was firm. "I understand. I know what it means to give everything. If my sacrifice can give Adanu a future, then I will pay the price." The masquerade tilted its head as if amused. The light of its mask flickered, casting strange shadows across the clearing. "You are bold, but boldness does not guarantee success. Still, if you insist..." It extended a shadowy hand, long and delicate. toward her. "Take my hand and seal your choice." Effie hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. Her injured hand throbbed with pain, but she reached out with her uninjured one, her fingers trembling as they neared the masquerade's outstretched hand. The moment their hands touched, a surge of energy shot through her body. It was cold and sharp, like ice and fire coursing through her veins. Her vision blurred, and the world around her dissolved into darkness. She felt as though she were falling, weightless, into an endless void. The masquerade's voice echoed all around her, deep and resonant. "You have chosen to give your life. Now, your soul shall carry the weight of the curse." Effie tried to steady herself, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She felt her surroundings shift, and suddenly she was no longer in the clearing. She stood in a vast, empty expanse, neither dark nor light, but something in between. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, and the air felt thick with power. Before her, the masquerade floated, its glowing mask now pulsating with a blinding light. "The curse is tied to me," it said. "For a century I have carried it. Now, you will take it into yourself. You will release your village, but in doing so, you will bind yourself to this realm. Do you accept this burden?" Effie swallowed hard, the weight of its words sinking in. This was the moment, the final. There would be no turning back. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness she saw the faces of her people, smiling, laughing, alive. It was for them that she had come this far. "I accept," she said, her voice steady. The masquerade raised its hands, and the glowing mask began to lift from its face. The light intensified, filling the expanse until Effie could no longer see. A sharp, piercing pain shot through her chest, and she cried out, falling to her knees. The masquerade's voice echoed one last time, fading into the distance. "The curse is lifted. Adanu is free, but you are mine now." When the light faded, Effie was gone. Back in Adanu, the first rays of sunlight broke over the village, casting a golden glow across the rooftops. The people stirred, their eyes blinking against the unfamiliar brightness. It was January 1st. For the first time in a century, they had moved beyond December 31st. The villagers gathered in the square, their faces filled with awe and confusion. They didn't understand what had happened, but they felt it. The weight of the curse had been lifted. In the center of the square lay the masquerade's mask, its glow now faint but steady. The elders approached it cautiously, their expressions a mixture of fear and reverence. One of them, the oldest, knelt beside the mask, his voice trembling. "She did it," he whispered. "Effie has freed us." The villagers murmured among themselves, their voices tinged with both joy and sorrow. They looked around, searching for her, but she was nowhere to be found. The elder stood, holding the mask carefully in his hands. "This will remind us of her sacrifice," he said. "Her courage has given us a future. We must never forget." The mask was placed in the village hall, where it would remain for generations, a symbol of the girl who had saved them, who had given everything to break the curse. Far beyond the village, in the shadowy realm where Effie now dwelled, she stood alone. The weight of the curse pressed heavily on her, but she did not feel regret. She closed her eyes and smiled faintly, knowing that Adanu was free. And though she was bound to the masquerade's realm, her spirit lingered in the winds that swept through the village, in the laughter of the children who now played freely, in the hope that had been restored to her people. Ife's name became a legend, a story told to remind the people of Adanu of the power of sacrifice and the strength of a singing. Though Effie was gone, her presence was felt in every corner of Adanu. The villagers swore they could hear her voice in the rustling leaves, in the gentle breeze that swept through the fields, and in the melody of the bird song each morning. The children, who had never known a day beyond December 31st, now played freely in the open fields, their laughter filling the air. They chased each other under the bright sun, their feet kicking up dust that sparkled in the golden light. For the first time in years, the village was alive again. The elders, who had carried the guilt of the curse for so long, now found solace in the freedom Effie had given them. They gathered in the square daily, sharing stories of the past and teaching the young ones about the girl who had saved them. "Effie's sacrifice wasn't just for us," the oldest elder said one day, his voice firm but warm. "It was for the future, to remind us that we must never take life or time for granted again." The villagers nodded in agreement, their faces somber but hopeful. They worked together to rebuild what had been lost during the century of stagnation. Crops were planted, homes were repaired, and the traditions of old were revived. But there was one tradition they refused to bring back: The masquerade. The masquerade's mask, now resting in the village hall, had become both a symbol and a warning. It was said that anyone who touched it would feel a strange chill, a reminder of the power it once held. The villagers left it undisturbed, a silent tribute to Efe and the lesson she had taught them. As the years passed, Adanu flourished. The village became a beacon of resilience and hope, drawing visitors from far and wide who came to hear the story of Efe and the curse she had broken. Storytellers gathered in the square, weaving tales of the brave girl who had ventured into the forest of echoes, faced the trials of the masquerade, and given her life to save her people. The children listened with wide eyes, their imaginations painting vivid pictures of Efe's journey. But what happened to her? One child asked one day, his voice small but curious. Where did Efe go after she broke the curse? The storyteller smiled gently, her eyes glistening with emotion. Efe's body may be gone, but her spirit is here, all around us. She watches over us in the wind, in the sun, in the rain. Every time you laugh, every time you smile, she is there, sharing in your joy. The children looked around, their faces lighting up with wonder. They stretched out their arms, feeling the soft breeze against their skin, and giggled. Efe is with us, they cried, running through the square, their laughter ringing out like music. Though Efe's sacrifice had taken her far from the world she had known, she remained a guardian of Adanu, her spirit woven into the very fabric of the village. And as time went on, her story grew into a legend, passed down through generations. The people of Anu never forgot her. On the anniversary of the day she broke the curse, they gathered in the square to honor her memory. They sang songs of gratitude, danced under the moonlight, and told her story to anyone who would listen. And as they danced and sang, the wind would rise, carrying their voices into the night. It was as if Efe herself were dancing with them, her laughter mingling with theirs, her spirit forever a part of the village she had saved. A child in the village hears Efe's voice more clearly than others, suggesting a deeper connection. The masquerade's mask flickers faintly one night, raising questions about its power. A visitor to Adanu asks too many questions about the curse, hinting that they know more than they let on.